Hello and welcome to Hassens County. I'm glad that you could join us again today for another TTRPG Talk. This series discusses tabletop role-playing games and related materials, suggests ideas for your own games, and takes a look at some of my own materials. Today we're going to be continuing the SRD series. This time we're going to be examining the E64 SRD created by Lux Maxima on itch.io. This SRD was created to make several of their recent or upcoming games like Earth 2064, Cottagecore, in the post-apocalypse. According to the authors, this SRD was heavily inspired by 1st edition Pathfinder, but made much more streamlined and open to narrative interpretation by the players and game master. Before we dive into the mechanics, I do want to point out that this SRD may be of limited application to all of you watching this video. This is because it was released under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 license. This means that you cannot sell any creation that you make using this SRD, and that your creations must also use the same Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike license. It is important to note that Lux Maxima is not doing this out of a sense of preserving their intellectual property, rather they make all of their games freely available. This would rule out using this SRD myself because I would at least like to have the option of receiving compensation for the time and effort I put into my game or other RPG creations. However, I think that even if I would not use this SRD to create a game, it is worth it to look at SRDs like this to see how similar mechanics I am already considering may play out in the wild, so to speak. With that being made clear, let's continue on to look at the actual mechanics of the E64 SRD. As with any other game based on D&D and Pathfinder, E64 uses a D20 system, albeit a stripped-down version. This means that all actions where failure may result are determined by the roll of a single d20 plus a character modifier trying to roll equal or over a target number. This target number is in turn determined by the GM based on the action's difficulty and other circumstances in the situation being involved. The SRD recommends that a good base target number should be 15. This means that an unmodified roll at average difficulty has only about a 6 in 20 or 30% chance of success. The examples of checks that are given in the SRD's explanatory vignettes are a 10, 12, and 15, giving us a spread of possible success chances of 55, 45, and the 30% that we mentioned previously. However, the character does have some characteristics that can make life a bit easier for the player. Each character in base E64 has 6 characteristics that you can see on the screen here. They roughly line up to your typical spread of 6 attributes from the games that inspired E64. However, it is recommended that a character should start with one characteristic at +2, another at +1, and a third at -1, with the remaining 3 at 0. Each point of bonus or malus changes the character's success chances when using that characteristic by 5%. These characteristic mods should be based on the character's role in their society. An example from Earth 2064 is the Energy Source Maintainer. This individual has a high precision and above average literacy, but is a bit lacking in the common sense department. The character from the E64 vignettes seems to be the leader of a local gang, who has high precision due to their shooting skills and a bonus to the literacy due to a background in hacking, but is rather scrawny instead of being fit, therefore giving them a malice to their vigor. These characteristics are applied to rolls depending upon the nature of the roll. Attacks use precision when determining hits at all times. What in other games would be called a skill check changes depending upon the skill in question. Which characteristic applies could be determined by the game master during the course of play, or it may come from a list of predetermined actions or moves commonly used in the game's settings, like hacking using literacy, or the mediate skill from Earth 2064, either using panache or common sense, depending upon your character's approach to the situation. Your character can also have optional freeform but predetermined feats that allow them to do certain special actions a limited number of times per session. The SRD and Earth 2064 do not elaborate any further in their texts about feats, but we do have an example from the E64 vignettes. The character in question seems to have a hacking-related feat that allows them to access the cyberpunky settings surveillance network and gain them unique, narratively important information once a session. However, in this example, the character actually fails their roll, meaning that, at least in this particular interpretation of feats, feats may not always necessarily be guaranteed, like powers in, like, let's say, a Lumen system. Each character has essentially 4 hit points called wounds. While the 3 temporary wounds can be restored at the end of the session or at narratively appropriate moments, the character will normally die should the character lose their 4th wound. It may sound like an E64 based game has the potential of being quite deadly, and they certainly can be, but this is somewhat mitigated by the fact that damage is determined by tiered weapon qualities ranging from a D4 for like fisticuffs to a D20 for epic, dramatic, damaging events. Once the attacking character's might or precision modifier has been added, if there is one, you then divide the die result by 4 to get the actual damage in the wound points. Based on the descriptions of the various weapons tiers and other rules, it is quite likely that the highest damage that a character geared towards combat might expect to do is 3 points, although a result of 1 or 2 is much more likely. So, combat is risky and rather fast, but may not turn out to be quite so deadly as we might be initially expecting. E64 seems to be what a good SRD should be, a core around which you could base your game. As you can see, there are no rules for advanced abilities or spells, although feats could cover that gap to a certain extent. Characteristics and wounds could also be rebalanced, something recommended by the authors in the game's itch forum. There are plenty of other ways that you could potentially flavor a core E64 experience to better fit a number of settings, from the vignettes cyberpunk setting to Earth 2064's post-apocalyptic pastoralism to something completely different like fantasy, like the Pathfinder that originally inspired this SRD. That said, with E64's non-commercial license and Lux Maxima admitting that their SRD is not heavily playtested, this may be an SRD to practice with or make quick homebrew hacks with, rather than to make a fully fleshed game for the general public. Thank you all for joining me today. Links, as always, will be in the description. If you'd like to continue to see more from this series, please hit the subscribe button and probably the bell too, in order to be notified of whenever a new video gets up. I do hope that you have a good zone, and don't forget to rate your itch purchases.